Hi, it's Rachel with Stirring the Deep. I want to dive into a little bit more about this idea of the pride being brought low and the prideful in heart, the proud in heart being brought low, which is being humbled, and how that's symbolized in this earthquake concept. When I read from Revelation about how the earthquake comes out from the temple and what that means. And so it's talking about this humbling. And being humble is realizing with God, the humility that He desires is that you realize that you need His wisdom to govern your mind. That anything of your own wisdom or of the world's wisdom is nothing, it is foolishness. And when you truly understand that, you are diligently seeking to understand His wisdom. And that's how you know that you're moving into that humbleness of heart, is because you understand what your own ways create, and now you are moving and desiring deeply to walk in God's wisdom, which is the paths of life. So the process of understanding humility and that having that humbleness before God is realizing, being aware, and it's learning that anything contrary to His way is not good. And it just creates harm and pain and suffering, destruction, all the elements of death is what it creates. And the other thing about pride and having that lofty and lifted up heart is that it's very oppressive. It's very oppressive to, obviously, because you're not walking in the wisdom of God. So anything that's not in the wisdom of God, which leads to life, leads the other ways leads to death. Okay, so it's obviously very oppressive and very damaging to not only the person that is the prideful in heart, but also to the people around them, because we don't live in a vacuum. Everything that we do affects other people. So when you have that haughtiness of heart, that lifted up heart, meaning you're thinking that anything of your way or the world's is something, then you are so damaging to yourself and to other people. And that's a very intense thing to come to the realization of, but that is what is required in order to really seek the wisdom of God. In Revelation 6:15, it says, let me turn there real quick, because it's talking about this humbling that's going to be happening during the tribulation. Okay? In verse 15, chapter 6, it says, "And the kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave, every free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb." Because it's against what? That prideful in heart. That's the iniquity that it's against, is lifting yourself up in your ways and the ways of the world above God's. And when you walk in those ways, that's what you're doing. So that's what it's talking about. And this ties back to Isaiah 2, which says, starting in verse 17, "The loftiness of man shall be bowed down, and the haughtiness of men shall be brought low. The Lord alone will be exalted in that day, but the idols He shall utterly abolish." Okay, so the people are brought low, but the idols are purged. Okay, that's where the wickedness is destroyed, but the people are saved, but as through fire, because they're going through this humbling process. It says, "And they shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth, from the terror of the Lord and from the glory of His majesty, when He arises to shake the earth mightily." That's that quaking of the earth. You see, that quaking of the earth is causing these people to do this. Why? Because He's bringing down and he's destroying the idols. The idols, remember, are those things that we serve to get to the desires of our spirit, right? Ultimately, we all have the same desires of the spirit, to know the purest of love and to have purpose and value and honor and respect and all these things in our life. But it's how we get there, okay? And how we get there is what we serve. And those are the idols that are being brought down, because all they do is destroy us. If we're walking any way contrary to God, all it does is destroy us. And that's what you come to learn and realize. Okay, when he does this, right, so he's shaking the earth. When he does that, in that day a man will cast away his idols of silver, his idols of gold, which they made, each for himself to worship. Because they're going to realize those things, those idols are going to start turning on you. They're going to start causing great harm in your life. And you're going to start seeing that. And when you see the harm that they cause, you're going to let go. The only reason we hold on to those things and serve them is because we think they're somehow good. Somehow they're helping us. Somehow they're serving us. Even if we see there is some harm, somehow we think they're helping us. But when you see and you go through this humbling and you are brought low, as those things turn on you and that you see that destruction they create, you're going to let go of them. To the moles and bats, to go into the clefts of the rocks and to the crags of the rugged rocks, from the terror of the Lord and the glory of his majesty when he arises to shake the earth mightily. There you have it again. Okay, that's what he's doing in these days. So the earth shaking, think of it, okay, so we're the dust of the earth, so he's shaking us so that all the idols, all the ways that aren't of him are being removed from our life. And that's how it looks, is that it's those things turning on you. You're going to see the harm and destruction that they cause, and all those things are going to be brought low. It's like sometimes we have to talk about people hitting bottom before they start changing in their life. Basically, that's what's happening. It's bringing everybody to hit their bottom. It's because it's at that place of bottom that you start to realize what you were doing wasn't working. What you were doing brought you to this bottom, because that's why you're there. If those things were working, you wouldn't be in that place. So they do not work. Do not be deceived. Do not keep doing the same thing and pursuing man's wisdom, thinking it's going to somehow redeem you. It will not. And in fact, there are a couple verses that talk about that, that I'll share with you in a little bit. Okay, so let me keep moving on here. A lot of people think of, and I want to address this real quick, the pride in heart. You know, these people that are being brought low are just the ones that are physically wealthy and rich and outwardly powerful. But God is addressing the state of the heart. So there are people at all different levels that, in terms of the money and the power they have in this earth, but in their heart is, what are you striving for? If you're striving and serving those idols at wherever you're at, that is going to be brought low. Okay? And in Isaiah 29, let me read this verse to you real quick. And so verse 18 through 21. It says, in that day the deaf shall hear. They can't hear the wisdom of God because they're so busy serving their idols. But when they turn on you, I'm telling you, when you come to that low point, that's when you start to hear. And God has to bring you to that low point, because as long as you think these things are somehow helping you, but they're really harming you, then he can't allow that to happen, because he loves you and he doesn't want you to be under oppression anymore. He doesn't want you to be in bondage. He doesn't want you to be in these afflictions and suffering and pain. But as long as you think those things are helping you, you're going to stay in them. So he has to show you what they're really doing. And when you do that, that's when you let go. So it says, in that day the deaf shall hear by the words of the book. Shall hear and the words of the book. And the eyes of the blind shall see out of obscurity and out of darkness. That's where people are now. When you're serving those idols, you're blind to what they're creating into your life, into the wisdom of God, right? Until you're willing to let go of what you think that goodness is and what brings you the desires of your heart, you can't embrace something new. So you have to let go of it to embrace the wisdom of God. But that's what this is saying is going to happen with people. The humble also shall increase their joy in the Lord, and the poor among men shall rejoice. When you get that poor in spirit, that's when you rejoice, because you start seeing the paths of life. In the Holy One of Israel, that is our wisdom, our truth, the Word of God. For the terrible one is brought to nothing, the scornful one is consumed, and all who watch for iniquity are cut off. Let me just finish this one verse. Who make a man an offender by a word, and lay a snare for him who reproves in the gate, and turn aside the just by empty words. That's what you find when you really start paying attention to what's happening in your life and why is this harm, why are you suffering. You'll see it's the idols that you serve, and you'll see that they're full of empty promises, that man's wisdom is full of empty promises that never deliver truly what you want. You will never find contentment, you will never find satisfaction, you will never find true fulfillment in those things. It's an insatiable hunger. That's what that lust of the flesh, it's never satisfied. But when you start walking in the wisdom of God, you start gaining that satisfaction and that contentment, because you're truly gaining the desires of your heart, that true love and that peace and that righteousness and that holiness and just an amazing life. So that is the end, which is very encouraging. So I've been talking about how when God's Spirit is in that Christ's Spirit is coming and being knit to those who are prepared, who have been prepared by the Holy Spirit, and now there's power in you. It's like that fullness of God is coming to abide in you. It's growing up in you. That's what's happening in the elect. That means that presence of God is here like it never has been before. And when that presence is here, that very presence will cause those idols to start to fall from the power of the words that are being spoken from that Spirit. Those truths are going out, and they are recreating this earth. And that's what you see as a picture in 1 Samuel 5, where when they brought the Ark of the Covenant in, and the Philistines set it next to one of their gods, Dagon, and when they did, he fell. So it's like that is a picture of when that Ark of the Covenant, which the elements of that Ark symbolize what is in us when we have His Spirit. It's that life, it's that bread of heaven, it's the truth, it's His law, it's all in us. So that Ark of the Covenant, that presence of God, becomes where the elect are. And then as it spreads and it fills this earth, that's where it starts. Okay, because they're the prepared vessels. So when that happens, the idols will fall because that presence of God is here. It's amazing. And this is the thing that you understand, is that why God is doing this is because of His love for us. That He doesn't, as I said, He doesn't want you in that oppression any longer. It is going to end. And people don't understand that it is the righteousness of God that brings the richness and the bounty and the blessing into your life. And it talks about that in Proverbs 21. So when you start understanding that righteousness of God and what it brings, you start seeking it in your life and following it and obeying it. And in Isaiah, getting tongue-tied, 31 is talking about more of what this is happening. Okay, and remember Egypt, you guys talking about when people are when it talks about relying on chariots and horses, and that's the strength of your own flesh. That's this looking to this world as your strength and the work of your own hands versus God and His wisdom and His ways. And so it says in Isaiah 31:3, now the Egyptians are men and not God, and their horses are flesh and not spirit. When the Lord stretches out His hand, both he who helps will fall, and he who is helped will fall down. They will perish together. So if you're looking to that wisdom of others, the wisdom of man of this world, then it's to get this job, to have this certain lifestyle, to pursue money because you think that's what will give you enjoyment in life, to pursue a certain relationship, to pursue self-righteousness and a certain code of morality, and to be a certain person that people try to do by outward works and outward things and outward appearances. All these things you're trusting in the physical, okay, instead of trusting in the wisdom of God and just letting that guide you each day, okay, and that being your trust. So that is the end of those things. And it says in verse 7, for in that day every man shall throw away his idols of silver and his idols of gold, sin, which your own hands have made for yourselves. Anything contrary to God's ways that you're serving, that will be brought down. So this earthquake is shaking to pull all these things away. And so now there's two paths, which I've been talking about, that you can go through, right, in this time. One is that you're seeking the wisdom of God. So on that path, when you're seeking God, the moment you start really seeking that wisdom, you brought to that low point, or you've gone far enough, you don't want to go any lower, right? You're saying, okay, I want to seek your wisdom, God. The moment you start doing that and walking in that, you start experiencing His grace abundantly. That is His power, His provision, His blessing at work in your life. And it's amazing. And if you do that, this is what it will be for you in these days. It says it in Isaiah 32. Behold, a king will reign in righteousness, and princes will rule with justice. A man will be as a hiding place from the wind, a man, and a cover from the tempest, as rivers of water in a dry place, as the shadow of a great rock in a weary land. Because you have that presence of God being knit to your spirit, you're becoming a part of that. Because as you walk in that wisdom, you become a part of His peace, a part of His love, all of those things of that spirit. Okay, and that's your protection. And that wisdom guides you perfectly through this life. There's all this stuff happening around you. The earth is quaking, right? So you need that wisdom of God, and if you follow it, He will keep you in perfect peace. You see that throughout the prophets, as that's what He does. That's His promise. If you seek His ways. If not, you're going to be falling in tribulation, in hardships, because those idols are going to be turning on you. That wisdom is going to be failing you. And it talks about later in that same chapter about realizing that all that you've been doing, all that you've been striving for, so you've been thinking, okay, I need to be at this place in my life because when I have these things, this job, this lifestyle, I'll be happy. So you've been striving for those things. All those strivings are going to fail you. They'll amount to nothing. And because that's oppressive to you, and God has to remove that so you can find His way, so that you can truly abide in freedom and blessing and joy and peace and in unity in that love with Him. It's actually amazing. So if you can understand that love of God, because a lot of people don't understand the love of God because of all the false images that have been around Him. Because if they understood His goodness, everyone would seek it. You know, when you just think of the perfect wisdom, the perfect love, the perfect peace, the perfect righteousness, being right-minded in everything in your life, that's the presence of God. That's what He wants to give you. And when you understand that, that's what you seek and that's what you go after, and that's when you let go of all these other things. And your life just starts to bloom into this fruitful field. So this is a couple verses here that summarize this dynamic of what's happening between these two paths, okay? People, starting in verse 12 in verse chapter 32, people shall mourn upon their breasts for the pleasant fields, for the fruitful vine, because it's going to fail them. It's not going to happen. On the land of my people will come up thorns and briars. That's what you'll experience. Yes, on all the happy homes in the joyous city. Because the palaces will be forsaken, the bustling city will be deserted, the forts and the towers will become lairs forever. Those things, those strongholds that you trusted in, are not going to serve you anymore in any way. A joy of wild donkeys, a pasture of flocks, until the Spirit is poured upon us from on high, and the wilderness becomes a fruitful field, and the fruitful field is counted as a forest. This spirit comes when you start seeking the wisdom of God. That's the spirit of truth. That's the spirit that you receive. And that's the thing, when you all these things are stripped away and you start seeing the thorns and briars and all that it is, that's when you start to let go, and that's why you start to seek something new. And because the people that are now seeking that wisdom, this is what they're experiencing. They're experiencing this fruitful field, and the fruitful fields counting as a forest. I mean, their paths are just growing up. I'm experiencing that. Just amazing what God is growing up as you walk in that wisdom. And when you start to see that, you just want more of that wisdom. That's what you are focused on, and you just leave and forsake everything else when you see that. But this is what that end will be. And eventually for everyone, because all those idols are going to come to nothing. Remember, I read that earlier. And in this couple verses that I just want to finish up here with, it says, then justice will dwell in the wilderness, and righteousness remain in the fruitful field. Righteousness in the fruitful field. Righteousness is walking in the ways of God. Do you see these connections, these choices that are laid before us? The work of righteousness will be peace. You are in the paths of peace. And the effect of righteousness, quietness and assurance forever. My people will dwell in a peaceful habitation in secure dwellings and in quiet resting places. Though hail comes down on the forest and the city is brought low in humiliation. So this is saying, while the hail, while the judgment, while the idols are being destroyed in other places, the people that are walking in that righteousness of God's wisdom, look at what their life is. Peaceful, resting places, quiet. This is how you know what path you're on in these days. Look at your life. Are you growing in peace and righteousness and love and blessing? That it's of God and from His wisdom, because you see His wisdom and you're walking it and you're seeing the fruit of it? Or do you see angst in your life and hardships and just, all these things coming up, just these pains and these issues and these concerns, and just those are the thorns and briars, just the things in your life just causing it to, taking away its peace. What do you see? Because that shows you what you're pursuing. But God is starting to shake the earth, us. And if all of us are being shaken, because everything that's of God is being purged, right? God is no respecter of persons. So everyone is being purged. It's just a matter if you're seeking the wisdom or you're not, in terms of how intense that shaking is going to be in your life. Till next time, keep stirring the deep. It's the one thing that changes everything else.